A 10-year-old boy on crutches limped into a crowded coffee shop, turned away by every person he asked for help. When he finally stood before a Hells Angels biker covered in tattoos, his voice trembled with one last desperate question. "Can I join you?" Everyone else had refused. What this boy revealed in the next hour would uncover a crime so horrific it would bring an entire brotherhood to its knees. This is Jack and Henry's story, and it will restore your faith in humanity. Before we continue, please subscribe to Biker Stories and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. This one will stay with you. The Copper Bean had occupied the corner of Elm and Washington for 2 decades. Worn wooden floors, leather booths that had seen 1,000 conversations, and the kind of strong coffee that kept locals coming back every Sunday morning. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where weekend mornings meant full tables and the easy rhythm of community. But on this particular Sunday, that easy rhythm shattered. The door opened and a small boy struggled inside. He moved with painful slowness, balancing on metal crutches, his prosthetic leg clearly causing agony with every step. His red shirt swallowed his thin frame, and his eyes swept the room with the desperate wariness of someone who had learned not to trust anyone. He wasn't looking for the restroom. He wasn't looking for his family. He was searching for a table, any seat, any human being who might offer him mercy. And every single person looked away. Jack Stone didn't look up right away. He'd learned years ago that people gave you more space when you kept your head down, your coffee close, and your attention on the Sunday paper spread across the table. The Hells Angels patch on his leather vest did most of the talking for him. But something made him glance up. The kid standing beside his booth was maybe 10 years old, maybe younger. It was hard to tell with the way his bones pressed against his skin. Metal crutches held him upright, and a prosthetic leg peeked out from beneath shorts that used to fit someone bigger. The boy's eyes locked onto Jack's for a fraction of a second before dropping to the floor. "Can I join you?" The voice was small, practiced at not taking up space. Jack gestured to the empty seat across from him. The boy lowered himself carefully, like every movement hurt, and set his crutches against the wall. For the first time in what had to be months, someone wasn't looking through him. Someone saw him. Jack folded his newspaper. "You hungry, kid?" Henry nodded before he could stop himself. Jack raised 2 fingers at Stella behind the counter. 2 breakfast plates, eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, the works. He turned back to Henry. "You got a name?" "Henry." "Jack." When the food arrived, Jack watched the boy's hands shake as he picked up the fork. Then Henry started eating, and everything else stopped mattering. He didn't just eat, he inhaled the food like someone who'd forgotten what a full stomach felt like someone who didn't know when the next meal might come, like someone who'd been starving for so long that his body had rewired itself for survival mode. Jack's eyes drifted to the boy's arms. There, dark purple bruises in the unmistakable shape of adult fingers. Someone had grabbed this kid. Hard. Recently. The marks were still fresh, still angry against the pale skin stretched too tight over bone. Henry caught him looking and tugged his sleeves down, but it was too late. Jack leaned forward, keeping his voice low and steady. "Who did that to you?" Henry's fork froze halfway to his mouth. His eyes shot to the door, not just a glance, but the look of a trapped animal calculating escape routes. The look of someone who'd learned that telling the truth came with consequences. "Nobody," Henry whispered. Jack had been around long enough to know what nobody really meant. It meant somebody who'd put their hands on a kid who couldn't fight back. Somebody who'd left a 10-year-old so hungry he'd risk approaching a stranger covered in scars and leather just for the chance at breakfast. Henry, Jack's voice was quiet but firm. I need you to listen to me. Whatever's happening, whatever you're running from, you're safe here, right now, in this booth. Nobody's touching you while I'm sitting here. You understand? Henry's bottom lip trembled. For the first time since walking into the copper bean, tears pooled in his eyes. And then, in a voice so broken it barely qualified as sound, he said the words that would change everything. My uncle's waiting for me to die. Jack Stone had seen a lot of evil in 41 years. He'd seen men beat senseless over card games, seen women with cigarette burns spelling out their boyfriend's initials, seen things on the road that would make most people lose faith in humanity altogether. But nothing prepared him for what came out of Henry's mouth. The boy kept eating between words, like his body couldn't stop even as his mind tried to process the horror of his own story. Fork to mouth, swallow, another broken whisper. My parents died 2 years ago. Car accident on the interstate. Henry stared at his plate. I don't remember much about it. Just waking up in the hospital and nobody being there except my uncle. Your mom's brother or your dad's? Dad's, Uncle Richard. The name came out like poison. He said I had to come live with him, that nobody else wanted me. Jack's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Let the kid talk. At first it was okay. He gave me a room, fed me, took me to school. Henry's hands started shaking again. Then he started drinking more, said I was expensive, that the life insurance money from my parents wasn't enough to cover raising a broken kid. Broken? Henry tapped his prosthetic leg. Jack's blood went cold. Henry, how'd you lose your leg? The boy's voice dropped so low, Jack had to lean across the table to hear it. He ran over it, with his truck. Silence crashed down on the booth like a physical weight. I was playing in the driveway. He said I was in the way. Said I should have moved faster. Henry's words came faster now, like a dam breaking. He backed up over my leg and then told the hospital I ran behind the truck that it was my fault for being clumsy, that I was always getting hurt. Jack's hands curled into fists under the table. After that, everything changed. He started locking me in the storage closet at night. Said I didn't deserve a real room anymore. Said I cost him too much money with the hospital bills and the prosthetic. Henry finally looked up, and his eyes were hollow. Empty. He feeds me just enough so people don't notice. At school, I tell them I'm not hungry, that I ate at home. How often does he feed you? Once a day, sometimes every other day. Henry took another bite, savoring it. He tells me I'm worthless, that I should have died in the accident with my parents, that I'm just waiting around to finish the job. Jack felt something dark and primal rise in his chest, the kind of rage that made good men do bad things. Henry, where is your uncle right now? Home, sleeping. He drinks on Saturday nights. The boy's voice cracked. I snuck out this morning, took some money from his wallet. I knew if I stayed another week, I might not make it. Why'd you come here? Henry looked around the coffee shop, at the families, the couples, the comfortable Sunday morning crowd that had rejected him without a second thought. I thought maybe someone would help. Maybe someone would see me. His eyes met Jack's. You're the first person who did. Jack reached across the table and placed his hand over Henry's small, bony fingers. I see you, kid, and I promise you, right now, you're never going back to that house. Jack pulled his phone from his vest pocket and dialed without taking his eyes off Henry. 1 ring. 2. Brooks, it's Jack. I need the Brotherhood. All of them. Copper Bean on Elm. Now. A pause. We've got a kid who needs protecting. I'll explain when you get here. He hung up and leaned back in the booth. Henry, I'm about to introduce you to some people who look scary as hell. But I need you to trust me. These men, they're my brothers. And when one of us needs help, we all show up. Henry nodded, though fear flickered across his face. 18 minutes later, the rumble started. It began as a distant thunder, then grew louder, closer, until the windows of the Copper Bean rattled in their frames. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. The Sunday morning crowd fell silent. Coffee cups suspended halfway to lips as the street outside filled with chrome and leather and the raw power of 30 Harley Davidsons rolling to a stop. The door opened and they walked in. Brooks came first, 55 years old with a gray beard that reached his chest and eyes that had seen everything twice. He scanned the coffee shop, spotted Jack, and moved toward the booth like a man on a mission. Behind him came a wall of leather vests, tattoos, and the kind of presence that made people instinctively step back. Jack, Brooks's voice was gravel and whiskey. His eyes dropped to Henry, taking in the crutches, the too thin frame, the fear. His expression hardened. Talk to me. His uncle's been starving him, locking him in a closet. The leg? Uncle ran over it with his truck. Jack's voice was flat, controlled. Kid ran away this morning because he knew he wouldn't survive another week. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. A man stepped forward, broad shoulders, construction-worn hands, kind eyes. Hunter. I've got a daughter your age, he said, kneeling down to Henry's level. You like video games? She's got a whole collection. And shoes. Tons of shoes she's outgrown. He smiled, and it was genuine. We've got you now, buddy. You're not alone anymore. Then came Jude, 6'5" of pure muscle, arms like tree trunks, a scar running down his jaw. He looked like he could tear a building apart with his bare hands. Henry shrank back. Jude's voice was surprisingly soft. I run an auto body shop, kid. Good insurance. Whatever medical bills you need, prosthetic fittings, therapy, anything, consider it handled. Brody pushed through next. Clean-shaven, sharp-eyed, former cop, current Hell's Angel. I'm calling CPS right now, and I've still got connections at the precinct. He was already pulling out his phone. Nobody touches this kid until we've got everything documented and locked down tight. Brooks placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, then turned to address the Brotherhood that had filled every available space in the coffee shop. Listen up. This boy is under our protection now. We're not leaving his side until he's safe. The uncle's in custody, and we've got legal standing. Understood? A chorus of "Yes, sir," echoed through the Copper Bean. Henry looked around at the circle of bikers surrounding him. Men society had taught him to fear. Men covered in scars and ink and the weight of hard lives. But their eyes were soft, protective, fierce. For the first time in 2 years, Henry felt something he'd forgotten existed. Safety. While Henry sat in Brooks's living room wrapped in a clean blanket, eating his third meal of the day and half watching cartoons he'd almost forgotten existed, 3 squad cars and 2 CPS vehicles pulled up to a house 7 blocks away. Brody had made the calls. His former partner led the entry. Uncle Richard answered the door in a stained undershirt, reeking of whiskey and yesterday's cigarettes. His confusion turned to rage when he saw the uniforms, then to something that looked like fear when they told him why they were there. "That kid's lying," he slurred. "He's dramatic, always making up stories for attention." Detective Sarah Chen wasn't interested in his excuses. "We have a warrant to search the premises. Step aside, Mr. Wallace." What they found in the first 10 minutes made seasoned officers reach for their phones to call supervisors. What they found in the next hour made 2 of them step outside for air. The pantry was off the kitchen. From the outside, it looked normal, just a door with a simple handle. But when they opened it, the reality hit like a fist to the gut. A padlock hung from a hasp recently screwed into the doorframe. On the outside, someone had converted this space into a prison cell. Inside, a thin camping mat lay on the bare floor. No pillow, no blanket. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling with no switch, controlled from outside. In the corner sat 2 metal dog bowls, one empty, one with a half-inch of water that had film floating on top. Detective Chen ran her flashlight along the door's interior. Scratch marks, deep ones, fingernail grooves worn into the wood from someone desperately trying to claw their way out. The medical examiner who arrived to document the scene later said the marks were consistent with a child's hands. Small, frantic, recent. "Jesus Christ," whispered Officer Martinez, a father of 3. "How long was he keeping the kid in here?" The answer came from Uncle Richard's bedroom. Investigators found journals in the nightstand drawer. Not diaries, documentation. Careful records written in neat handwriting that made the content even more chilling. Week 14. Reduced meals to once per day. Subject showing signs of weight loss but still functional for school. Must maintain appearances. Week 23. Subject becoming weaker. Increased isolation to prevent outside interference. School called about absences. Blamed illness. Week 31. Medical expenses from prosthetic exceeding projections. Subject represents continued financial burden. Natural decline in health will resolve situation within acceptable time frame. The word subject, not nephew, not Henry. Subject. Detective Chen flipped to the last entry, dated 3 days ago. Week 47. Subject's health deteriorating rapidly. Estimate another month, maybe 2, before natural conclusion. Life insurance policy value $500,000. Will claim death resulted from complications from prosthetic leg injury and depression following parent's death. Narrative established. Natural conclusion. He'd written it like a business plan, like he was waiting for a stock to mature. Sarah Chen had been a detective for 16 years. She'd seen brutality, neglect, abuse in forms that haunted her sleep. But this calculated, documented plan to slowly kill a child through starvation and isolation, this was something else entirely. This was premeditated murder disguised as guardianship. "Bag everything," she said, her voice tight. "Every journal, every receipt, every piece of paper in this house. And get the crime scene unit in here for the pantry. I want photos of every inch." Uncle Richard was arrested within the hour. When they read him his rights, he had the audacity to claim he'd done nothing illegal. "I fed him," he protested as they put him in handcuffs. "He had a roof over his head. I'm not the bad guy here." Officer Martinez, the father of 3, stepped close. "You locked a 10-year-old in a closet and waited for him to die. You documented it like a science experiment." His voice was ice. "You're exactly the bad guy here." As they drove Richard Wallace to the station, Brooks called Jack with the update. Jack looked at Henry, who'd fallen asleep on the couch, a half-eaten sandwich still in his hand. "He's never going back," Jack said quietly. "Damn right he's not," Brooks replied. Brody sat in the precinct conference room surrounded by detectives who used to be his colleagues. Old habits died hard. He still knew how to work a case, how to connect dots that others missed. "Pull everything," he told Detective Chen. "Financial records, medical history, insurance policies. This bastard planned this. We just need to prove it." The evidence came together like pieces of a nightmare puzzle. First came the financial records. Richard Wallace's bank statements painted a picture of a man drowning, casino charges, online poker deposits, sports betting accounts. In the 2 years since Henry's parents died, Richard had burned through over $80,000 chasing losses. His credit cards were maxed, his mortgage 3 months behind. Collection agencies had started calling. The man was financially underwater with no life raft in sight, except one. The insurance investigator found the policy in Henry's parents' estate documents. Standard life insurance on a minor, taken out when Henry was born. In the event of Henry's death, the sole beneficiary was whoever held legal guardianship. $500,000. He knew about this policy from day one, Detective Chen said, spreading the documents across the table. The day he signed guardianship papers, he knew exactly what that boy was worth to him dead. Brody's jaw tightened. "Keep digging." The medical records arrived next, and they told their own damning story. Children's Medical Center had treated Henry twice in the past 14 months for severe malnutrition. The first visit documented dangerous weight loss and signs of prolonged hunger. The second visit, 3 months ago, showed worsening conditions, muscle atrophy, vitamin deficiencies, and what the doctor noted as concerning bruising patterns. Both times, Richard Wallace had explanations ready. Henry was a picky eater. He had anxiety about food after his parents' death. He refused to eat despite Richard's best efforts. The doctors had noted their concerns, but couldn't prove neglect without more evidence. "He was smart," Officer Martinez said, reviewing the files. "Kept the abuse just under the radar. Brought him in when things got too visible. Played the concerned guardian, then took him home and kept starving him." But it was the neighbor interviews that broke the case wide open. The woman in the house to the left, Mrs. Patterson, admitted she'd heard crying at night, multiple times. "I thought maybe the boy had nightmares," she said, wringing her hands. "After losing his parents, you know. I didn't want to intrude." The couple on the right side heard it too, sometimes screaming, sometimes just long, desperate sobbing that would go on for hours. "We thought about calling someone," the husband said, shame evident in his voice, "but we didn't want to cause trouble if it was nothing." Mr. Chen across the street had seen Henry sitting outside in the early mornings, even in winter, like he'd been locked out. The kid always looked so thin, so scared. But Richard said he had medical issues from the accident, said he was fragile. 4 neighbors, 4 separate witnesses who'd heard or seen signs of abuse and did nothing. "People see what they want to see," Brody said bitterly. They heard a kid crying and decided it was easier to look away. By the end of the day, the case file was 3 inches thick. The gambling debts, the insurance policy, the medical records showing a pattern of starvation masked as pickiness, the journals documenting premeditated murder, the neighbors who heard everything and did nothing, the padlocked room that turned stomachs even in photographs. District Attorney Morrison reviewed everything and made a call that took 30 seconds. "We're charging him with attempted murder, child abuse, false imprisonment, and fraud. and I'm pushing for the maximum on all counts." She looked at Brody. "That boy's testimony, combined with this evidence, this case is airtight. Richard Wallace will die in prison." Brody called Jack. "It's done. The DA's going for attempted murder. He's not getting out." Jack was quiet for a moment, watching Henry sleep peacefully for the first time in years. "Good. Now we focus on the kid. He needs a future, not just justice." "Already working on it," Brody said. "Court date for emergency custody is set for tomorrow morning. You ready?" Jack looked at the small boy curled up on his couch, finally safe. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." 3 months later, Judge Diana's courtroom was quieter than usual. This wasn't a criminal trial. That would come later, and Richard Wallace would face every charge the state could throw at him. This was about Henry's future. The boy sat in the witness chair, his new prosthetic leg fitted properly for the first time in his life. Dr. Edward had kept his promise. Henry had gained 15 pounds. His hair was cut. His clothes fit. But more than the physical changes, something else was different. He didn't look afraid anymore. Judge Diana leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Henry, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Who do you want to live with?" Henry didn't hesitate. His hand rose, finger pointing directly at the man sitting in the gallery, wearing a leather vest with a Hells Angels patch. The man with tattoos, covering both arms. The man who looked like he'd been through a war and came out the other side harder but not broken. "Him," Henry said. "Jack Stone. He saved me." Jack's throat tightened. Judge Diana followed Henry's gaze and studied Jack for a long moment. She'd seen the case file, knew his history, knew what most people saw when they looked at him. "Mr. Stone," she said, "approach the bench." Jack stood, and the courtroom watched as the biker walked forward. Brooks, Hunter, Jude, and Brody sat in the gallery, a wall of support. "You understand what you're taking on?" Judge Diana asked. "This boy has been through trauma most adults couldn't survive. He'll need therapy, medical care, patience, and love. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jack said without hesitation. "You have a criminal record." "I do. Nothing violent. Nothing in the last decade. I work construction, own my home, and I've got a brotherhood that'll help me raise him right." Judge Diana looked at Henry, then back at Jack. She'd been a family court judge for 20 years. She'd seen biological parents fail their children in ways that haunted her, and she'd seen strangers step up and become the parents those children deserved. "Family isn't always blood, Mr. Stone. Sometimes it's who shows up when everyone else walks away." She picked up her gavel. "I'm granting you full legal guardianship of Henry Wallace, effective immediately." The gavel came down. Henry burst into tears, but this time they were good tears, the kind that meant relief, safety, home. 6 months after that Sunday morning at the Copper Bean, Brooks's backyard was packed with motorcycles, bikers, and enough food to feed a small army. Henry's birthday, his first real birthday in years. There was cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, Henry's favorite. Presents piled on a table. Hunter's daughter had brought her old video games, wrapped in bright paper. Jude had gotten him a new bike, custom painted in Hells Angels colors. Brody gave him a police badge, honorary, with Henry's name engraved on it. But the best gift was the one he couldn't wrap. Henry stood in the middle of the yard, surrounded by 30 bikers who'd become his uncles, his protectors, his family. Men who society feared but who'd shown up for a scared kid when no one else would. Jack walked over carrying 2 plates of cake. He handed one to Henry and sat beside him on the porch steps. "You happy, kid?" Henry looked around, at Brooks laughing with Hunter, at Jude teaching some of the younger members how to work on their bikes, at Stella from the coffee shop, who'd come to celebrate and brought her brother who'd survived a similar story, at the Brotherhood that had chosen him. His eyes welled up, but he was smiling. "I'm home," Henry said. Jack put his arm around the boy's shoulders and pulled him close. "Yeah," he said quietly, "you are." If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to remember that real heroes come in all forms. Drop a comment telling us your thoughts. And don't forget, sometimes the most unlikely people become our greatest protectors. Thanks for watching Bikers Stories.